Members, thank you for your presence in attending this PUTC today. Today is Monday, June 6th. I will repeat again. I will go back again. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your presence today to attend this PUTC meeting. Today is Monday, June 6th, and the time is 10:35. I now call this meeting to order. Before we start, I wanted to um, get a motion in adoption of today's agenda. Motion carries. I will now introduce the members. I will do a roll call, and I will start with my far left. Um, Rep. Ed Props, non-member, but he's here. Yeah, I have a member, Corina Magofnia, to my left. And my immediate left, right here in the front, is Vice Chair Donald Manglonia from is the Ways and Means Chairman. And then to my far right, I have Representative Vicente Camacho for the Foreign Affairs member. And of course, in front of me, I have my consul, Joe Tyrone, and my legal clerk is Ivano Taitano. Thank you, faculties, for being here to help me on this event. I have the IT guy on my left, Mr. Diaz, and up in the front is the guard, Sergeant of Arms. With 4 members, this constitutes a quorum to conduct today's meeting. At this time, I'll go to the item number 2, public comments. Do I have anyone in the building to make a public comments? I see none. We go to the next item, new business, none. And now we go to number 4, the old business. And I would like to invite um, our CUC director, Mr. Gary Camacho, to come forward. So please assign him to take him to his assigned chairs. Members, before we go through the rest of today's agenda, I would like to inform you that the main focus of this committee meeting is to hear an update on recent and past projects under the director of Mr. Gary Camacho, COC director. So, Mr. Gary Camacho, the COC director, would you please would you like to make your first comment or statement?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and committee members and non-committee members. It's a pleasure to be here. As always, it's a privilege for me to be here and present any updates under the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation, and in addition, answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, COC director. As I would like to proceed my first question, Mr. Gary Camacho. Uh, there's been a lot of, we want to ask you to comment, but there's been a lot of calls from constituents about their fuel costs. And I myself, I just received my $900 fuel charge. Can you explain that to me? How did that happen? I look at all my usage, and there was not that many difference between 1 month to the other month to the other month. And at this point, I came up with a bill of $900, which that just take away my biweekly salary. Can you explain that to us and how that happens, sir?
Absolutely, Chairman. I'd like to just state that and kind of give it some history. Um, in 2008, we were going over and experiencing almost the same scenario with the economic crash and the increase of fuel, drastic increase and a rapid increase of fuel. And if I remember, because it's been quite some time, I think $35, $40 a barrel to upwards of over $150 a barrel. And at that time, we didn't necessarily have the LEAC, although we had a surcharge. We didn't have the LEAC and following it as rapidly as the rates were increasing. Um, if we go back then, there was a number of meetings in CUC involving many different stakeholders outside of CUC who would get together and make a determination as to how we were going to make some payments and where we were going to make those payments in the event or with the limited revenues we were receiving. As rate increases, it doesn't necessarily mean revenues increase. Do understand that at that time the question was were we going to buy parts for the power plant or were we going to buy fuel? Um, and it turns out that we were purchasing more fuel to keep the engines running. And at the time, it was thought that even if we bought parts and didn't have fuel, what are we going to do? So some of the decisions, although I wasn't necessarily part of it in my capacity at the time, I was pretty much in the room because I was the individual that was asked to prepare load shedding schedules because it was determined at the time that something was impending that would require that type of action. So my role at the time was to, because of my understanding of the grid, both production and transmission and distribution, I was the individual that was inevitably going to make a load shedding schedule based on whatever the decision was made by that body. Um, and so it turns out that of course we understand what happened. The power plant because the lack of parts started to fail each engine one at a time, and inevitably there was no power supply coming from CUC, and we had to indeed have to take some sort of course, and it is my understanding at the time that members of CUC at the highest level came to this very room and asked for assistance to bring in emergency power supply, which fortunately at the time was approved, and Agreco was brought in to assist with that power supply, and then inevitably a plan was put together to help rehabilitate the plant with some of the funding. It is my understanding. Now, again, if we fast forward, that's the case here. The only difference between today and then is that we're not having a discussion pertaining to fuel. We're not having to sit down and have a body determine whether we buy parts or fuel or fuel. The increase in the fuel or in the rate is two components to the rate. Is one is a CUC base rate and the other is a fuel component. The fuel component is what's been increased. And the fuel component is not a revenue, nor should it be an expense for CUC. As an expense would be a pass-through. I mean, would be forwarded to the consumer. So it's not nor a revenue or an expense. So in that sense, the money's received regardless of what it is, and it follows it on a month-to-month basis. And it then is handed to mobile. And so we obviously have enough fuel capacity to be able to continue to provide and sustain the program, the power supply. Now, the CUC base rate is the other component. That is for CUC. That is indeed revenue for CUC's expenses. And do understand that Georgetown represented the CPUC in negotiations, and economist.com represented the Commonwealth Utilities. They negotiated this as both their experts in the rates, and they continue, and they've represented both parties for many years, and then back and forth. So technically, Georgetown's approach has always been CUC cannot have any surplus funds. We even asked in one docket, which is still pending, for a 1 penny increase, so that we can put that in a restricted account for typhoons or recovery, emergency recovery. That at the time was not necessarily denied, but it wasn't entertained. Was not entertained. So it's a still pending item. And of course, we obviously understand that that's something that would help us in very difficult, challenging situation. And again, I mentioned it would go. The idea was for it to go to an unrestricted account specifically for that purpose. So um, again, we're that element, that portion of the rates being the CUC base, has not seen an increase. Has not seen an increase since 2014, and I think in 2014 it was minimal, but it has not seen an increase. There's been a huge impact in rates reduction, it being a variety of different rates that have been adjusted, or customers who have rates that have been converted to other portions of the rate structure, but that has not been reviewed wholly through our rate or completely through our rate consultants, which we need to do very soon to see what those impacts are. We also, again, any area that has been increased, which has only been fuel, and that methodology that is done on a month-to-month basis is required by the CPUC prior to although the program still continues, the regulatory body still continues, the board body does not exist in or does not have a complete group. Um, Now, what we're using and have been using since then is their requirement for us to. It's a formula in which they provide that we must follow. We do follow also with the requirement to place that and inform people through the media, which we do every month. And also we provide a report to the CPUC body um, through the agency, and not necessarily the members, because they're very limited at this time, but we do submit as required, and we have ever since they have vacated, or the members had vacated their positions. So again, we followed only what has been required of us, and the methodology is any 4.5% increase would require an increase of the rate. Any reduction of the current rate by 4.5 or more percent would require a reduction. And in many of the years in 2016, 2017, and parts of 2018, there were consistent reductions of the rate, of that fuel rate. So it does follow the international market, and we follow that based on the requirement by the CPUC.
Okay, you do have a formula, and you have a formula that randomly pick a person like myself. I got picked this month. There were previous constituents calling in and said my bill is this high, and what will be the next? I mean, is another randomly pick on any customers to pay that higher fee? Is there any way how we gonna resolve this problem, because the calls that have been coming to our office is very um, saddening.
Just I completely understand, Chairman, but the rate is not the process is not random. The process is across the board for every account in the Commonwealth Utilities kilowatt hour account for the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation. It is everybody, to include myself and every employee also, but it's for everybody. It's not random. It's not specific to any individual. It is consistent as a rate structure across the board.
Before I go on, I would like to introduce to my right, Joel Camacho, and also to the left, Representative Tina Sablan, Ways and Means. Is there any member who would like to add anything? I recognize Representative Corina Magofnia.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, welcome, CUC Executive Director Gary Camacho. So My question is, with everything going on here in the cinema, as far as the continued increase in fuel prices, um, how is CSC doing financially?
Well, it's obviously very challenging because increase like this doesn't necessarily mean increase in revenue.
Right.
And back to what I said, the increase does not affect the revenue portion of the rate. This is just a wash. This is a pass through. So whatever is used and whatever fuel is used in that cost, we passed and we bill and forward to mobile. So in reality, the impact of the increase actually creates conservation, significant conservation, and I know that's happening in my home, and a lot of the even at the office, we exercise a lot of conservation to do so, and to try to have some sort of action based on what we can control as a consumer.
Thank you for that answer. And I asked that question because a lot of our constituents have been calling and inquiring about it, and I would like for them to hear it personally coming from you, whether or not it has any effects on their bills. So, with your explanation, obviously it's a pass through and it doesn't really affect um, their bills per se, correct?
Well, it does affect their bill, but it affects their bill through the
Through the
fuel side,
right.
which doesn't affect CUC in a manner of increased revenues whatsoever. It does not. It's what's referred to as a wash, a pass through. Again, how it does affect CUC is that because of the increase of the rate, it most people, and rightfully so, and even when we talk in CUC, we understand the loss of revenue. We understand and actually anticipate it, because of that area of the portion. Yeah, so it has not increased revenues whatsoever in CUC. In fact, I would imagine it continues to lower it.
Right. So I'm asking that for clarification because I think the perception out there is that when these things happen, CEC um, over overcharges our ratepayers in order to raise your revenue. But it's in this case, it's not that. As you said, it's a pass through. As the rates go, the fuel prices go up, the rates go up proportionately, and it's across the board and not just specific to the different ratepayers.
That's absolutely correct. And again, this is happening everywhere. Everybody has to deal with this, and not only does it affect the utility industry, but it also affects retail, wholesale, airlines, everything. It affects everything. And what's currently happening in the international affairs. Some of the conflicts that are being experienced now have some impact in this, obviously, but that's way out of what CUC is concerned about. It's concerned about trying to do the best they can to try to help in some reprieve, but it also has to understand that the explanation has to be very clear that this has no revenue impact on the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation at all. In fact, in many areas, it's causing concern because areas where customers don't pay, then our revenue portion has to pay for that non-payment of FAC, because mobile is going, or I'm sorry, the fuel supplier is going to get their fuel, and this was an issue in 2008, to the point that when we were giving them payment, they didn't want to deliver as they do now. They deliver with credit, but because of the situation then, they were, they didn't deliver unless they had a check in their hand. And then as we weren't getting paid after a while, they wanted to make sure that the checks were cashed and cleared in the bank before the valve was opened at the manifold at the port. So again, we have to understand that they are a business, and they need to protect themselves also. But at the end of the day, we're not going to receive product until payments are made. But fortunately, today we've been able to keep the credit standing, and we're able to get fuel in advance and then build our finances to make those payments as they rotate. Yeah.
So last one. So a couple weeks ago, when we were in Rhoda, we just confirmed two PUC members, board members, and with that, how soon do you think? Have you guys communicated with the new members to see how soon you guys can uh, meet and, I guess, revisit the rate structure that's currently in place, and what kind of impact would that have on our ratepayers?
No, I have not. We've been trying to just focus in on this and a good number of stipulated order items over the last week and a half. But I am very excited to have a body I can work with. Very excited to be able to sit and allow them to understand the program and them to and for us to work together and seeing what we can do. Again, we do definitely have a serious responsibility to ensure that we provide the lowest rate possible. And I think by not raising the CUC base rate, which is the area pertaining to CUC since 2014, I think we're doing the best we can in trying to keep that minimal impact to our consumers. But at the same token, we must always understand that it's also a huge responsibility to ensure that we have a sustainable operation, that we have a utility supply to the consumer. And that's extremely important and a very high aspect, along with the most economical price possible.
Sorry, I said one more, last one, but one more. Would you please explain to our viewing public, because this is one of the most frequently asked questions, how is it that let's say, for example, their usage for power is, let's say, $60, but their bill is close to $400, because the fact is at least 300 to 400% more than what their use is. So if you could please kind of just explain that.
Yes, again, that's the fuel portion of the bill, and we are mandated by CPUC to follow that fuel adjustment clause, and to follow increases and decreases. And as I've mentioned before, in 16 and 17 and even 18, we've had continuous reduction in fuel. And so we follow that. And then, of course, today is what it is. But today also has a conflict. There is an international conflict right now affecting the supply of fuel. And I'm no expert in fuel, far from. Not claiming to be at all, but as we all see, if fuel is a main portion of or a main and a key aspect of the conflict, then it's being affected internationally, and that rate and that impact is being forwarded to the manufacturers, refineries, and then inevitably the utilities, and then the utilities as a pass through has to moves that forward to the consumer. Now, be very clear, it doesn't necessarily mean that CUC wants to do any of this. It is something that in order to sustain its operation for the time being has to do this. Again, back to 2008, this methodology wasn't there. And in 2008, we were sitting right here requesting for millions of dollars so we can have emergency power supply come in. And as I said before, my role was to prepare a load shedding schedule, which we all, for those that were here, remember. It was a very difficult time. And again, we also try to ensure that we power then moves water, and that impacts the water aspect, and also the stipulated orders that were mandated to follow. So very important that we don't necessarily want to do it. We're following a methodology required and mandated of the Commonwealth utilities to follow, and it's only the CPUC's intent was to ensure that we prevent that scenario in 2008 from reoccurring, and also ensuring that there's a sustainable operation for the community.
Thank you for that clarification. I yield.
Okay, thank you, Representative Coram Gufnia. I have one question before passing on to the next members. You mentioned about the power plant. You've been purchasing expensive parts, and we only have one power plant. What is your plan? That we do have money from the ARPA to make sure that we don't have a blackout one day. What is your plan, sir?
Well, we've been working on as I've mentioned in our previous discussions, Chairman, we do in my previous reports with yourself and Representative Mawilfnia, that we continue to work at the power plant. We have a great number of people there, a great pool of people, very talented, very hardworking group of people that work at the power plant, and frankly speaking, all areas of the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation. Um, but but we've overhauled engine number 7 recently. That's a large unit. We're in the middle of, I think, number 6, and we're and also engine number 2, and we have a brand new engine that we've purchased. The skids and the contractor, because we wanted a turnkey program. That group has been on island for over a year. Man B&W, um, out of Germany and Singapore, they've been on island for over 1 year, and assessing the power plant, reviewing the existing foundation, making sure that it's stable for the unit that they're coming in. Because as a turnkey project, they're liable. They're liable that the engine operates and maintains and provides the necessary kilowatt hours under the warranty. So we've given them the whole turnkey. So they've got to come in and look at the foundation. They can't later say that the foundation was an issue because we own that. So they've brought in their experts to make that determination and ensure that all liability is with the contractor. The skids, the skid mounts have arrived. The engine is on its way, and many of the other parts have come in. And as I said, the expert engineers are on island in preparation. Now, there's been some concern. The engine is requiring a 200. I don't know if I remember correctly, 208 or 400-ton crane that is required, and it will be brought. That 400-ton crane has raised a number of different issues that we've never experienced in the CNMI. One of them is whether it's going to have cause serious damage to the ports because of the size and the pressure that it'll bring with it. But we've cleared that with the executive director of the Commonwealth Ports Authority, Mr. Tenorio, that the foundation at the port is capable of withstanding that type of pressure. So that engine will be brought. It's on its way from Germany, brought in and installed. The side of the power plant will be open. Of course, that'll require serious planning because you can't have any moisture in the power plant. So we're trying to do it in a manner where we can get it in a safe way for everybody. Um, and so that is ongoing. And the great thing is once it's commenced later in the year, um, want it understood that there will be an engineer that will remain from Man B&W for the next year to monitor its operation and ensure that the liability and the warranties are protected. So we have that. Now, we've done a number of other things. As you know, stipulated order 2, the CUC has been under stipulated order 1 for clean water and stipulated order number 2 for petroleum. The petroleum portion of that is the petroleum that was found 10 years ago, which was causing serious concern for of course, the CNMI, but also U.S. Department of Justice and U.S. EPA. And as you know, I report twice a year in federal court to Judge Carter, and I give him updates both on SO1 and SO2. And I don't know if you're fully aware, but I think you are. I think I've updated you that we've completed 16 tasks of the stipulated order number 2. So SO2 is almost completely removed, other than some of the mandated accounts and some of the ongoing monitoring programs forward. So we're very proud of that, and Judge Carter and DOJ and EPA also very proud that we were able to resolve those after 10 years. Now, there's been a lot of people over many years who put in a lot of time in CUC, but we've been able to get that cleared up in February. So in that regard, the power plant is probably the cleanest it's been in many years. And as Judge Carter mentioned in court, that CUC should be proud that they have a program today that is clean for the environment, and for the CNMI. And this is the same thing with the island of Rhoda. Same thing with Rhoda. We've completed that, but we also have continuing ongoing monitoring programs that we have with an outside party, um, and reporting to us over the next, not only to us but to EPA and DOJ. So as far as the environmental aspect, we've got new oil water separators signed off under Arpa, both at Power Plant 1 and that services, I think maybe Power Plant 2 also, but we also have another power plant. You mentioned earlier that we have one. We have to have three currently, and we're in the process of opening Power Plant 3 at Isley Field. Again, we're resurrecting that from the early 2000s. Now, Power Plant 4 is in Middle Road, and that is a standby power plant, but it does produce up to 10 to 12 megawatts, its capacity. And we've had it over the years. I don't know if it can do it right now, but it does, I think, have a capacity of up to 14 megawatts. But a lot of those engines are being overhauled and maintenance is being performed. But if you see in Power Plant 4, that also has been cleared by EPA. It's got new fuel tanks, new oil water separators. The asphalting has all been prepared. It has been approved by EPA and DOJ, and of course signed off by Judge Carter. So we do have a production program that is continues to be evolved and repaired and maintained. We do and look forward to adding generation, it being renewables, of course, and also looking to repair or replace a couple more engines, um, and, uh, and and uh, and again trying to get newer units into that power plant. We are working closely um, with EPA, DOJ, and we've got a lease agreement already with CPA regarding Power Plant 3. Power Plant 3 is to operate, I think, 45 water wells in the Obsan Isley area in the event of a disaster. So although it's the farthest from the power plant source in Lower Base, it will have an independent program to be able to produce water or pump water in the event of a disaster and not be dependent on the overhead system from Lower Base.
Thank you, Director. That was good information. Great update. Um, yes, we have power plant, but they are still under work, which means you just mentioned that some of them are being overhauled. Um, I open to any members, non-members, if you would like to speak. Okay, I recognize my Vice Chairman here, Representative Manglonia.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning again, Director. I guess maybe if you can explain to the viewing audience, again, like as Rep. Karina have mentioned, we've been getting a lot of calls. So whenever we see the fuel price increase at the pumps, we can, almost, it's fair to say that the price for utilities will go up, and we're trying to understand the correlation between the 15-cent increase per gallon at the pump versus the $200-$300 increase in utilities. Does that, is there a direct correlation between the 15 cents that we get at the pump versus the hundreds of dollars in utility costs? I mean, if that's the same increase that CUC is getting from the supplier, how does that affect the greater increase in utilities, if that makes any sense? I mean, there's probably some complex calculation to it, but just a basic understanding, if you can provide the members as well as our constituents.
Yes, sir. Again, I don't know what the true connection is in relative comparison to the gas gas prices opposed to low sulfur diesel. I don't know what that is. I can tell you that the methodology we use has been provided to us by the CPUC, and that formula is inclusive, and we follow that formula accordingly.
When was the last time this formula was um, visited?
Well, it was my understanding. It was the last time the body was and
Organized?
yeah.
When was
Well,
that? Do you know?
if I remember correctly, maybe early 2016. If I remember correctly, I know they were I attended one hearing, and then the body dissolved. The CPUC body dissolved um, with with I think the remaining two moving on and not renewing.
Okay. And so, based on that formula, you know, well, I guess we're still trying to figure out. I mean, even with diesel, even with the 30, it's similar to what the you know gasoline increase. We've seen the 20 cents, 30 cents here and there. Um, I just, we're trying to figure out if buying in bulk from CUC is still better than, say, with CUC investing in a storage unit to buy fuel at a cheaper rate, maybe even, or um, but even if we're seeing that 30 cents at the pump for diesel and for fuel, um, you know, it we find it hard to see that correlation in utility costs being 200, 300 if we take the same amount of fuel that we're getting multiplied by the increase. It still doesn't compare to the increased costs in utilities. You know, do you understand what I'm saying? So, like,
I
if I were
understand.
to get 100 gallons of diesel and with this, say, 20 cents added on, it's nothing compared to the rate that the change in utility costs being $200, $300 more than what we used to pay the previous month. So,
Now,
I guess we're trying to figure out.
yeah, I think I understand what you're saying now. I was not here when this was calculated and determined by the CPUC. The fuel percentage, like you said, is with gasoline. On the low sulfur diesel is with CUC, and it's I'm sure it's based on the ratio of 15 kilowatt hours per gallon, and to some extent, but I'm not certain of that. But it is a formula that was provided to us by the CPUC to follow, to ensure that we followed. That was their formula at exceeding 4.5%. Then you above you increase, and 4.5 below. Our CUC's rate that we follow is the CUC base, and that remains the same and has continued to remain the same since 2014.
So with the CPUC formula for the FAC, it at the end of the day, there's no excess charges in regards to how much you purchase and then what's being used.
You mean as far as for CUC as a revenue?
Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's a pass through. Yeah, we bill what was used.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So clarified. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Mangonia. Anyone like to recognize Representative Ed Props?
Thank you, Chairman. And good morning, Director. How are you? Good. Thank you for coming in today to answer some of our questions. We appreciate your time. Um, I just wanted to go back to some of the things you mentioned earlier. You had mentioned there's a new engine that has been purchased that is turnkey. What's the total output for that new engine? I guess that's my first question.
It's my understanding it's a 9 megawatt.
Thank you. And the total output needed for how many megawatts is needed for or used for the CNMI for Saipan currently?
It's my understanding that we're at 33, 34 peak demand.
Peak demand. So it's still just a fraction of what is needed for brand new engines. Then I mean, it's good. We're looking at basically about 1/4 of the peak demand that would be needed. The other engines are the older engines that we've often heard about many times. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And from our different meetings, we have often talked about the need to retire these old engines, these antiquated, outmoded engines. I do remember talks, uh, discussions about a new power plant with new engines. Is that still moving forward? What's the status on that?
Absolutely, that's moving forward. I've been in discussion with the Department of Energy um, and many other federal agencies in that regard. Was part of my presentation in Hawaii to the different federal agencies that were there. Um, and I've had and I continue to have my conversations with the U.S. Department of Agriculture in that we are preparing accordingly for the base load, the foundation of our power program, which is the power plant, of course. And we're definitely looking to replace. And in fact, I've gotten designation already for the former CUC DPW site for the new power plant. And that power plant will have smaller engines, which is the trend moving forward in comparison to the demand. A good example of that is I'm not going to mention the utility, but there was one utility who had a very large engine, I think 40 plus megawatts. And when that unit went down, it was very difficult for them to recover. So even they have recommended go smaller units because then you can then standardize your parts, and not only that, but you can then rotate your maintenance a lot better than having to turn off 40 megawatts at a time. So, but to answer your question, Congressman, absolutely, we had a discussion on Friday with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Specifically for that, I have gone to Guam Power and discussed these programs with them, and we work very closely with them as they are going to be soon constructing a new 200 megawatt power plant there also. But yes, the idea is to get a new power plant. And in the design, incorporate renewable energies in that same design, so we don't have to integrate later and maximize. Well, I don't want to say maximize. I want to optimize that option and be able to prioritize that through battery service, and then of course take advantage of diesel. Diesel technology today would easily allow us to lower our kilowatt hour easily by 4 cents, if not more, based on the savings on fuel consumption, based on lube oil consumption, based on available parts and less expensive parts. And then, of course, based on the size of the unit and also the technology, the technology that would make it a less labor intensive program than the program we're currently doing.
Thank you. I have just a few more questions. Thank you, Director. Um, so do you have the ballpark figure, the approximate cost of what it would take, the amount to have this new power plant with the new smaller generators? Is there a approximate price tag to this or estimate?
Hey, well, when I say smaller generators, it's really more between what we currently have. We have 13.5s and we also have 7.5s. So it's not necessarily smaller. It's more the middle sized units, and the ballpark figure, depending depending, we're still doing studies on our demand and anticipated demand forward, forecasting. We do have folks that working on that and trying to understand that a little bit better, and then we can then try to size the unit or the size of the power plant based on that information.
And that would, and the, well, we're talking money. Who is ultimately going to be financing this project? Is it through grants, or are we getting help from Uncle Sam, or are we going to be, how are we going to be subsidizing or paying for this? Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're a rate-based program, as you know, and but we have more recently, more than at any time in the past, have maximized and put a significant amount of focus on grants. There are, of course, most grants are restricted to specific areas, um, and we are looking, yes, to we have a small grant program internally. I've been speaking with the Department of Interior on expanding that to a greater level with their assistance. And that those conversations are going very, very well. So of course our option is always to try to look for opportunities like that first, to lessen any impact to the consumer. That's priority. But at the end of the day, at some point we will have to sustain and maintain and update and upgrade our system through our rates, and that's why the rates are established. Part of the reason why they're established, of course. Um, now again, even though we get a new power plant, we could very well get a lower rate because of all the things I had mentioned earlier about the efficiencies that come with new technology, that come with these with the low diesel sulfur, and then of course the units we're getting are going to be dual fuel. Dual fuel being that they have the potential to burn gas, liquid gas, natural gas, and in the event that that becomes an option, because I know we are working closely with Guam on that in that regard, and if that becomes a feasible option, then we would easily be able to convert to a more economical fuel. So we're trying to ensure that we don't corner ourselves, but allow ourselves opportunities in the future to again capitalize on cost savings.
Thank you. And just one last question for this first round. I wanted to touch a little bit with regard to, we're talking about renewable energy. It is my understanding from previous meetings that we are up to date, right, with the public law requiring renewable energy percentage. Is that correct?
And the percentage was?
I think we're at 30% now, and I, huh? That I think we're supposed to be at 30%. Is that correct? So, are we at 30% for with regard to meeting the public law requirements, which is I believe at 30% through solar power, or I guess is that our only alternate renewable energy that we're utilizing right now? Is it solar?
Currently, yeah, we don't have hydro options. We don't have a wind study yet, but I know that's going to be going soon, and that'll take probably a year or two. But yes, from my understanding, based on installations and applications already accepted prior to closing, we are at, I think, between that combination, I think 31%.
Thank you. And that has been the from again, and I'm going back to our previous discussions in meetings and informal meetings with you and some of your team. Um, we have been advised in the past that there there currently is a cap in place with regard to solar power. So we know families that would want to do solar, but they have said that they've already reached the limit, I guess, per feeder or something to that effect. And it is because from the explanation that was given to us and our constituents that if it exceeded a certain amount of solar, it could create an unstable grid because the generators that we are currently working with could become unstable. They are again outdated, outmoded, and we would need newer, more stable generators. That was the explanation that was given to me by an engineer and some other experts. Is that correct, or what is the reason for putting a cap on with regard to solar?
Well, if, with all due respect, Congressman, I'm not sure who these experts are that you're referring to. I can't speak for them because I wasn't. I don't know who they are, and I didn't. I wasn't there during the conversations. But I will say one thing though is one of the feeders, Kiza 4, that's already fluctuating. We already have fluctuations that we're experiencing at the power plant. So we're not necessarily in a position to want or unwant. In fact, CUC was, we were very adamant early on about putting a net metering program on, as a municipal utility. It's not about profit. It's about what we can do for the consumer. Um, but at the same token, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that we have a sustainable utility. We want to make sure that we're there for the consumer. That's critically important, that we provide a safe, reliable, clean power supply, and that's what we're doing. And we're just trying to make sure it has anything to do with restricting anybody from being on, and not at all. Uh, we just, in fact, we're trying to complete soon a study that's been ongoing for almost a year now, and it's funded by the Department of Interior, which is a model for it's a system model, and we originally did it for solar penetration, but it can be used in a variety of different ways. But one of them is solar penetration. So then we're not randomly or blindly just installing systems, and then later have an issue in saturation or with saturation. Saturation was an issue, and I had met with both Hawaii Electric and Kauai Utility, and Kauai is a co-op. Hawaii Electric is an IOU, which is a privately owned utility. And both have informed me, particularly Hawaii Electric, and they're a great bunch of experts, and they know very well what it is they're doing. But they had an issue with saturation where they had far too many connected grids, that it was affecting their stability. And they also have given us great advice about making sure that we tread carefully to ensure, because not everybody has renewables, and we need to make sure that those that do not have and decide not to aren't affected by those that do. So again, it's CUC's responsibility, and takes that responsibility very seriously, to ensure that we don't have fluctuations and trips, because protective devices are going to react, and protective devices react, and then they're triggered one after the next. And as I've mentioned before, we've had issues not necessarily with solar, but with engines, where, for example, we lose a load, and then of course the protective eyes open, and then we have big problems. Having solar across the island is great. It's an aggregated, distributed system. But when we start getting to multiple in certain areas, and we start to lose 2 megawatts, 3 megawatts at a time, and then the clouds clear, and then we pick it up. You have you have to have the technical capabilities to be able to do that. We want it to be, we wish, but we also don't want to gamble that if we don't, we're gonna make the people, the consumers suffer. So with this model coming out soon, we'll be able to see and incorporate in the model certain systems, and see how it reacts on the model. And then we know responsibly that we're moving forward in a manner that is, which is a huge word in the utility, particularly in the renewables, is a non-disruptive program or system. Yeah.
I do have other questions, but I'll yield for now. And Director, thank you very much. I appreciate your answers.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Rep. Ed Props. And I notice, what do you call it? Recognize Representative Tina Zablon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Director.
Morning. Good
Welcome.
to see you.
Good to see you as well. I have a number of questions for you today. One, so the study that you were mentioning, this is the Integrated Resource Plan, the update?
No, it's not.
Oh,
The study
okay.
I'm referring to is the model for renewable well, we did it for renewables, but we can use it for anything else.
I see. And is there an update underway now for the Integrated Resource Plan?
Yes, ma'am, there is. It's an update that we had funded. Thank you to Jess Blasius and the others under CDBG. And that, if my understanding, it is being advertised.
It's being advertised now.
Correct.
Okay, because it hasn't been updated since, was it 2015?
Yeah, the 2015 was adopted. So we are now going to update in my discussions with the Department of Energy. Jennifer Desario out of DC had mentioned a while back that with the technologies today, with batteries and a variety of other things, it would be good to do an integrated, and the lifespan of an integrated study is approximately 5-6 years, and it's been that since. So we want to see, and we all know that renewables has advanced significantly over the past 5 years, and that's what we need to see today. And we
Okay.
need to see those advancements and how it benefits our consumers. In fact, one of the facilities I visited very recently, although it's a relatively new 20 megawatt facility, they even told me that, and although they're at 400 watts per panel, the new ones that are coming out today are 600 watts per panel, which is huge, particularly on an island setting, because of course your footprint, if you're targeting a specific size in megawatts, your footprint now gets smaller, right? And that's important on an island.
So what is the timeline for completing this update?
On which the integrated resource plan.
Yes.
Of course, we're going to have to bring in an expert, and that's what the advertisement's for. And that integrated study, it would depend on what those bids come in, and of course, it's going to be meticulous, I'm sure, and it's going to involve stakeholders like potentially yourself and many others. But I would imagine 8 months to a year, maybe. Again, I'm just saying that, but I'm not the one that's going to be performing. But I would imagine around that time frame.
Okay, thank you. And then going to what CUC charges for fuel, is there any independent review of the fuel adjustment charge? And whenever CUC makes the call that it's time to raise the rate for fuel, is there anybody outside of CUC that reviews that decision?
Yes, as it's mandated that we submit a report to the CPUC, and we do that every month, and it's also mandated that we put it in the paper
Mhm.
and we inform the community each
But
month.
as you know, the CPUC hasn't really been functioning, right? So who are you submitting it to, and is anybody at CPUC responding?
Well, I'm responding and saying that we're following it. I have not seen that.
Well, I guess just to verify that the agency is actually adhering to the formula that was approved by the PUC. I don't know how many years ago. Was that 2014, 2016?
Um, Now, am I receiving anything? No.
Okay.
But I'm. Should I be checking on that? I don't know. We comply with all the requirements, and I'm yeah.
Yeah. Well, and this isn't really on you. It's the
Sure.
responsibility of the regulatory authority,
Sure,
right?
sure.
But you can see why there would be questions and frustration from the ratepayers if if the charges are going up and there really isn't a regulatory authority exercising independent oversight on these charges to verify, right?
Sure, and I would, with all due respect, I would fully understand if it wasn't being complied. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think you also earlier mentioned, was it 2014? Was that the last time that CUC rates were actually adjusted?
The CUC base, yes.
Okay, the rate structure.
The CUC base rate.
Okay. And in your view, is it time to update CUC's base rates?
Yes. Well, what do you mean adjust? I mean,
To update.
the update could very well require an increase.
Hmm. I
Um,
understand that.
yeah. Um, yes, I mean we've spoken about that as late as last week, in getting everything coordinated for that, because we already know there's a variety of different rates that have been adjusted,
Right.
governmental to commercial and so forth,
Right. Right.
which would have an impact
Okay,
to the
so
rate.
sorry, not to cut you off, but my time is limited, so I just wanted to get through the questions also. So, um, if we had a functioning Public Utilities Commission, it would be their responsibility to review CUC's rate structures, right? And it's not necessarily true that there would have to be a rate increase, because
No, I didn't say it
if there
was.
were
Yeah.
improved efficiencies at CUC, then there could very well be a rate decrease as well, right?
Yes, for improved efficiencies like
Mhm.
51-year-old engines, a new engine
Mhm.
would cost some
Yeah.
money. Yes.
Yeah. I guess my next question then is, would CUC be prepared to propose a new rate structure if and when we were to see a functioning Public Utilities Commission that could
Of
receive that?
of
Yeah.
course, because that's the whole purpose. That's the role is they have their consultants, we have ours,
Right.
and we propose, and we go back and forth, and then and make that determination based on logic and good business practice, of course.
Yeah. Thank you. And does it make sense to you to continue charging the government the pretty significantly, it's much higher than even the commercial rate, right? Does that make sense to you? Is that something that you think, in your professional opinion, that should be revisited?
Well, I'm glad you said professional opinion, because in my personal opinion, which you didn't ask for, would be nobody should pay. We should all just do things for free. That would be my personal opinion. My professional opinion is this: the CPUC and the CUC get together, and they review these things, and they have over the years reviewed it. Although I wasn't party at the time, I wasn't in this capacity. When I had done everything, and again, I mentioned it earlier. CUC, as CPUC as mentioned in the past, or not CPUC, but their consultants. It is my understanding of an informed that CUC, should not have a surplus in funds at all. In other words, it just charge for its service.
But just
Um,
the question about
no,
government utility
yeah,
rates.
but I'm getting to that. I'm trying
Yeah.
to answer you.
Yeah.
By doing that, then what you have is you have a structure, and you have your classes, and your classes now, but we also have a total cost, and that cost now is going to be distributed across three different categories, and the three different categories, for the most part, is we try to do everything we can to reduce the residential rate, and then the commercial also we try to do and help encourage business, the economy. So to some extent there is some subsidy provided through the governmental portion to try to assist with residential accounts. Um, I think the concern, more than anything, should be at the residential account, because they have no methodology in recovering costs. Other areas, business, commercial, and residential, I mean, governmental, do have options, potential options, and methodologies to recover. Residentials do not. So, you reduce one area and you balloon another, and I really am not too interested in ballooning residential accounts. I would like
But
to keep
sorry,
residential
I
accounts
don't
as much
mean
as
to cut
possible.
you
That was
off,
just
because
my opinion.
I'm not suggesting
Oh no,
to raise the
I
rate per
wasn't saying you
se.
were. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that
But
as the structure has it, you reduce one, you balloon another, and so
if I could
it would
clarify,
inevitably do that.
Mr. Camacho, if I could just clarify, because you know as well as we do that the government is notoriously bad at keeping up with its utility bills, right? And that helps nobody when the government doesn't pay even at any rate that it's being charged. That helps nobody, and it actually hurts ratepayers as well, and it certainly hurts CUC operations. So I guess my question is, like, is it time to revisit even the rates that government is paying? Because if they're not actually paying it, and it's hurting CUC operations, somebody has to pay for that, right? And maybe what we need is some kind of balancing act, and a rate structure that would make more sense. Even though the intention of subsidizing the residential rate is good, it may not be working out the way the way we had hoped it would, right? But my next question. So I understand that BCQ has issued an administrative order to CUC for numerous violations of drinking water regulations dating back to 2019. And this includes a very detailed summary of the deficiencies that were identified and CUC's failures to correct them. There's a penalty that totals nearly $250,000. Director, some of these deficiencies strike me as pretty basic. I mean, we're talking about unscreened openings over multiple water tanks, unlocked or missing hatches, failures to maintain ladder cages, inadequate security or no fencing for months. Despite multiple notices of violation by BCQ and lots of correspondence and promises from CUC to fix these problems, what is the status of CUC's compliance with this AO?
Well, we've completed everything.
As of when?
Well, we've completed them in throughout a period of time, but the last one was completed in March.
In March
That's
of
correct.
this year?
That's correct.
And wasn't the $250,000 invoice just recently issued to CUC? Was that just last month?
That's correct.
So it's just the penalty that hasn't been paid yet.
That's correct. And we are working with them on some understanding or some considerations. Again, it's not something that CUC, of course, had any intention or neglected to do. Some of these were come off of I mean, don't forget, some of it was attributed to the disaster, and some of the programs were that we would repair them and get reimbursement. We didn't have the funding. We didn't have the money to repair some, and some of the ladders, some of the fines are and granted, I'm not arguing any of it. Make that perfectly clear. But when the ladders are an issue, or the fence that went down at the airport. Now, again, as I said,
openings aren't covered.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
The openings weren't
Right.
covered for water
Right.
tanks.
right. But we do testing all the time, and we don't distribute water without clean, safe water. So, but all of that. But again, it was funding was the main factor to it. We were very, very fortunate that we had consideration from the governor's office and Mr. Attelig to fund us the money, or to provide us the funding through ARPA to immediately get that. Once we got the funding, we acted very, very quickly. But again, the ladder cages, the fence that was down, were and a few other things. We don't challenge them whatsoever. But make it clear that when we did get the funding, we acted immediately, and repairs started to happen. And the last one was repaired in March, but I think we were complete with most of them by end of December, if I remember correctly. But again, we had a supply chain issue, which all of them had said there was a supply chain issue. There was construction labor issues. There was material issues. In fact, even the fence it was extended by 3 months or so because of the fact that they just didn't have chain link, couldn't get chain link. So there was a wide range of different things. But again, I don't sway away from any responsibility whatsoever on it. But I do want to make clear that the staff, once they got the financial support, acted extremely fast and dealt with the situation accordingly.
Yeah. I mean, it is unfortunate though that it took over 2 years to get the funding to fix some of these pretty significant deficiencies in our water system. And then what about the 250,000 penalty? Where will CUC get the funding to pay that?
Well, we're working with BCQ and seeing what we can do about some sort of payment program on it. Again, it is, if that's what we need to do, then we have to do it. We don't sway from our responsibilities. But again, we there have been a lot of things accomplished over that period of time. So there's a lot of work had transpired. But there were some things that we just could not find funding for. But again, as soon as we did, we acted. Some of them were even vendors were identified same day once the funding was provided to us. And again, our staff works hard. They do what they do, and like anything else and anybody else, they need the support to be able to respond, and they did very, very quickly.
Well, thank you for that update. And thank you also for the update earlier on SO2. I wanted to ask for updates on SO1 and actually more generally, which of the technical positions required in the stipulated orders are currently filled?
Currently filled, ED, DED,
Sorry, could you just
the resident,
pronounce the
the
acronyms?
executive, deputy executive, the what are the CNO, but the water personnel at the supervisor's level, and the DRCs and the controller,
The DRC is what?
direct responsible.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's at the staff level at the water wastewater programs. Yeah, the ones we don't have filled is the water manager in position and the chief water wastewater engineer. Those are the two, but we are and have been advertising in a variety of different places, and I think we've distributed. We've just got another listing from EPA because we report this with EPA, and we have weekly meetings with EPA and discuss this and many other issues. EPA is providing us another, I think, 40 locations to advertise. We do advertise in the American Water Wastewater Association, and we do advertise in the American Public Power Association and a variety of water engineering sites. And we also have headhunters, a headhunter involved, and we also have recruitment groups involved also.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update. I've been pretty concerned about the high turnover that we've seen in some of these technical, pretty hard to fill positions, right? And I mean, CUC has been able to recruit people to come here, but there's been such high turnover, it seems that there's difficulty retaining them. What steps, if any, are you taking to improve retention for these positions that are so essential for reaching compliance with the SOs, and also spending all the federal money that you're getting for water infrastructure?
Well, I mean, like anywhere else and anybody else, salaries. When they don't want to come because of salaries, or they counter with higher salaries, that's really the driver. And like anywhere, whether it's CNMI or anywhere else, it's the driver. And let's try to understand um, uh, with of course all due respect, that the amount of support coming out of the U.S. right now, federal programs, to all the utilities in the U.S. And the territories, and then the new one with the climate infrastructure has provided a huge range of possibilities for any applicant anywhere. Where before we'd have a lot more responses. Today there's jobs all over the U.S. Engineers are extremely difficult to find, and upper management extremely difficult to find anywhere, because the salaries are much higher, or higher everywhere, to include U.S. mainland.
Does
So
your
the
HR
challenges are there in that way.
right?
So recruiting people isn't too much of an issue as long as we become competitive.
Does your HR do exit interviews with staff as they leave? I'm just curious if you have, I guess, documented that these are the reasons people are leaving, or are there other reasons that CUC maybe should be aware of so that you can improve that and keep your people?
Well, I think we have. I think our deputy director retired at the age of 68. He was here almost 5 years. He wants to come back. In fact, he emails me regularly about coming back to even at a different capacity. He wants to come back work for CUC. The deputy director that filled his position, Mr. Tim Bodell, recently, had even mentioned in his interview that he has a detached retina that occurred a month earlier, and that would have to get checked even if he was hired. We went ahead and hired him because he seemed to have a good fit with CUC. But when he went back 3 months later as scheduled, it turns out that his retina was further detaching. Now, he had emailed me recently, about a week and a half ago, and he says that he should be 80% ready to go, and that he has been informed that it's not going to get any better. So he's obviously and has emailed me routinely since he's left, and says that he's available. So I don't, I think that even for him leaving and willing to come back, along with Mr. Gilmore, and others, there was a couple other folks that had left because, frankly speaking, when one of them said, "Well, my wife wants to get back to teaching in the U.S." and well, you can't stop that. If his wife wants to go, then I can most assure you, most husbands will follow. But other than that, I think we've had the CFO. He went through his contract. We have a new, our CFO currently has got many years of experience with Guam Water, and I think his experience is helping us deal with the SOs currently. And since you mentioned the SOs, we had SO1, we had another one completed just last week. So we continue to move forward in compliance of our stipulated orders.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. And then my last question, and maybe these are questions within a question. I have to do with typhoon overtime after U2. How much did CUC pay out in overtime?
I'm not certain of that. I don't know. I don't know that.
Who could tell us that?
I can get back to you on that. Yeah.
Do you know what was the overtime rate that was paid?
The the typhoon rate, I think, is depending on the time, but I think it's
During U2.
I
Right after U2.
right after U2. I think it's double time.
So, and is that consistent with your policy? I thought CUC's overtime policy was 1.5.
Well, I'm saying it could have been one. I don't know what the rate was I don't know what the rate was at the time. If it's 1.5, then it's 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
But I can get back to you on that. Absolutely.
Sure. Because this legislature has been interested in
Sure.
the amount of overtime that the government paid, and as you know, the central government absorbed over $8 million of overtime that wasn't reimbursed because they violated CNMI policy. So how much has FEMA actually reimbursed CUC for overtime costs?
I'm not sure exactly how much they have, but I can get back to you on that also.
Okay. Does CUC policy allow you and other managers to receive overtime?
I think during the storm, I think so. Yes. During recovery.
Okay. And did you actually receive overtime?
Yes, I did.
Do you know how much you received?
I'm not exactly, but I
Okay.
did for the time I worked. Yes.
So you don't know if CUC had to absorb the cost, or if ratepayers had to absorb the cost of overtime for anything that FEMA would not reimburse?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not reimbursable, then it comes through revenue for payments for as part of that CUC base. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, how did CUC pay for that then? If you said yourself that you're not allowed to have surplus money, like how were those costs?
It's part of the operation
So it was passed on to ratepayers.
through the rates. Yes, but there was no increase in the rate.
How's that possible?
Well, you obviously have to. I mean, you have to incorporate it in your expenses, right? So obviously, you look at your expenses, and at that time, there really wasn't all that much expense because most of the labor was being charged to FEMA under the recovery.
Right, but you don't know how much FEMA was able to pay back, right? Or was able to reimburse.
It is my understanding that FEMA was supposed to pay for all of labor, for all of the labor back. Yes.
Okay. I will have some questions for
Sure.
follow-up for you, and we could get that information
Sure.
after this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Tina Zablan. I have one information to give you. We did confirm 2 people for the CPUC, and I hope that every rate that we increase in the future will be certified by them. I know you base yourself from the 2016 last meeting with them, and I don't know who's been recertifying it for every rate that you increase. And for the burst on Chalanquiza that has happened over the weekend, and there have been other pipe bursts in the past, and even in Cacman area. I was informed that some of those had happened because there were lumbers or wood of anything that went into the pipe. Do you have quality control or inspector in your that's always at the site, director?
Yes, we do. We oversee the installation and repairs. The repair and the damage over Chalanquiza had no pipe in it. I mean, no wood in it that I'm aware of. There's no debris whatsoever.
Not in Cacman either.
In Cagman, I think there was in one particular repair in the Cagman 2, I was found out that there was some wood, and we have since tried to communicate with the contractor who can't seem to. I don't know if they're in business anymore, but there was also a significant amount of more than anything. There was chlorine buildup in the pipes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone
I'm
else
sorry?
before we go to second round?
I'm sorry, it was calcium.
It was calcium. Okay. Anyone else before we go? Once. Okay, second round. Thank you.
Thank you for the second round. One question, Director. We have a meeting with the Public Auditor's Office and the Ports Authority after lunch, to discuss the OPA 1%. And in their correspondence with us, OPA indicated that CUC has not been paying the 1% for many years now. And because of the way that the law is written, what hasn't been paid to OPA is actually now owed to the general fund, totaling over $20 million. What steps is CUC taking, if any, to resolve that?
I mean, CUC's waiting.
Waiting for what?
We sent a letter to OPA quite some time ago to have a meeting to discuss, as the law states that the agencies can negotiate, and we've not received any response, although we've continued to follow up.
Right. So my understanding is
Mhm.
OPA can negotiate with you for what's currently due, but for the past due amounts, it's actually now owed to the central government, to the
Well,
general
but
fund.
they understand the letter was submitted quite some time ago,
Mhm.
and we're just waiting for that response to be able to sit and negotiate. It is my understanding, sit and negotiate. And this was as far back as Alan Fletcher's time. We have proposed quite some time ago, years ago, that CUC would be more than happy to pay for services rendered. For any service we receive from OPA, we would be more than happy to pay for. I'm not sure when there was the last time when there was an audit even performed by OPA of CUC. Normally, CUC has to go and purchase or get a contractor to do that. And don't get me wrong. I mean, we definitely want to support OPA 100%. But I just wish that we could support OPA for services rendered.
Yeah, well, it doesn't quite work that way with like investigations, right? Like, I mean, the whole point of that 1% fee is to establish OPA as an independent, autonomous agency.
Sure. And
Um,
the reason why we want to negotiate also.
But you don't owe 20 million to OPA. CUC owes 20 million to the general fund. And in the past, I know CUC has been able to negotiate like offset agreements with the central government, because the central government owes you, you owe the central government, and you can offset the amounts that haven't been paid with OPA's 1% in years past. Is that something that is on the table right now?
No, it was never the concept and the approach of offsetting anything was never the case, and then never. And don't forget, I'm sitting in for previous executives, but the idea has always been that the largest line item is inclusive to the operational budget, but should not, and we believe it should not be part of the 1%, which is fuel, because fuel is a pass through, it's a wash. And the wash should not be charged and included in the 1%. That's always been our position, and the position, and we continue and willing to sit and discuss with OPA in that regard. But there's been no response in at all in that. Although we've met on other matters, because again we support OPA 100%. But we've sat on and discussed things with OPA and other matters, but OPA has never come to sit and discuss on that particular issue.
I see. Okay.
So that's all. It was never to disregard
Does the central
the
government owe?
value of OPA whatsoever. Not at all.
Thank you for that. Does the central government owe CUC anything at this time?
Well, I'm sure because we have a 30-day. I mean, we bill monthly, so I'm sure.
I mean, for like overdue accounts.
I don't know exactly, but I would imagine many of them today are prepaid. So that's if they don't pay those, the power goes out in those accounts. So
Okay, but you don't know what CUC is owed currently.
no, I'm sorry.
Outstanding.
I'm sorry, Congresswoman. I do not
Okay,
know.
maybe we could get that from you as well. Thank you. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Tina Sablan. Anyone else on the second round? Okay, I have one. Director. Regular hooked up customer like myself and the prepaid, do they get the surcharge like I got that I received from COC? If that's the case, I will move to prepaid.
Absolutely. When everything all of it is being charged, um, the metering system is a different methodology of payment, but the billing is identical. The charge is identical. The rate.
Thank you. Anyone else before we close? I have one. Recognize Representative Corina Magofnia.
Thank you, Chair. And this is more of a information sharing. So I received some information from the mayor's office about 4 locations in Precinct 3. So Garapan, Navy Hill, Gualarai, Chalanquis, and this is in regards to water leaks. Now, apparently, it has been reported to CUC months ago about these water leaks, and to this day, those leaks have not been resolved yet. So I'm just simply sharing, and maybe I could share those locations with you after the meeting so that your staff can take a look at it.
Absolutely.
Thank
Greatly appreciated to whoever informed you, and to yourself also. That would love to get that information.
Thank you, Rep. Corina Magofnia. One question before we close this. Since you mentioned about all these repaired pipes on the road, and we've seen a lot of them after they're repaired, that road was not repaired. So, how long do you take, or do you repair those roads after you repair the damage or the pipe repairs?
Thank you for that question, Chairman. CUC does have open accounts to these for the asphalting companies. However, the asphalting companies have informed us over the years that their equipment is rather large, and they don't make small they don't mix small amounts for a road. They have to consolidate a number of different sites. So then when they batch, I guess that's the term, when they batch, they have enough, when they batch the minimum amount, they can immediately go and utilize that asphalting for those sites. But they have to accumulate the volume to meet the minimum batch production. And that's why. So as far as CUC is concerned, we continue to push and immediately start to prepare payment or accounts to get them done quickly. So we're dependent on the companies, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. I recognize Rep. Ed Props.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll make this brief since I know it's lunchtime and we have a 1:30 meeting upcoming. Director, I just wanted to ask, how much has CUC received in ARPA funding so far, actually received?
I think we've been informed that we've for the variety of different projects we've submitted, I think we've been approved. I guess I used the word approved for 12 million approximately. But I think we've received about maybe 5 million in actual funds. And again, those are both approximate numbers.
And this money that is received from ARPA, these are going to what projects?
Well, one of them is vegetation clearing, you've noticed, around the island. That was for water, basically to try to protect the power system from failing or interruption due to vegetation. Um, so then the water supply is not affected. And the other or another is, and that's for labor and equipment for those folks. And then the other is, or another is uh, uh, the vehicles, vehicles for water division and wastewater division, and more water projects and sewer projects, and also the oil water separator at Power Plant One, because that falls under a water project.
So none of this money is going towards infrastructure for CUC then? I mean, well, I guess vehicles would be considered that, but actual generators, or is that's just not enough then, that amount?
No, but I think they're more revolved around water wastewater. ARPA is water wastewater, and I think broadband. Yeah, so the although there was some funding that went to the power plant, that went to the oil water separator, so it fell under water, a water project, and then of course the vegetation was to protect the water supply, or the power to the water supply and everything else for that matter on going towards those infrastructure. But in addition, there are some water and wastewater repairs, and so that is infrastructure. So yes, it is affecting infrastructure.
Thank you. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Um, since your presentation is update and hopefully that everyone understood what is going on with the CUC, I now close this meeting. And if you have any closing statement, Mr. Director, feel free.
Well,
Thank
first of
you.
all, again, I want to express my appreciation to be here, speak with all of you, and do the best in answering your questions. Uh, Again, CUC has no interest in raising rates, particularly any rates that have been raised since 2014. Um, it is something that is provided to us and mandated for us to follow. It has been no revenue, um, and at the same token, it should not be an expense, or in times it seems to be. But again, it's also very important to understand that we are moving with a number of different things, as mentioned by Congressman Probst. We are looking and working closely and pushing our efforts towards a new power plant that would not only be beneficial and support the future of the CNMI, but in all aspects to include public health, public education, and of course the central government, support economic growth, um, but also uh, deal with an ailing power plant. But at the same token, bring, from my understanding, better rates, because then you're not dealing with an expensive aged utility. Those efficiencies that will come from those updated technologies in the low sulfur fuel, and potentially the natural gas potential, then could continue to enhance that, along with renewable energies that we would like to get built into any design forward. So again, the utilities is doing its best, and I can attest to all the staffing doing their best in trying to provide on the island of Rota, Tinian, and Saipan, and the best they can. And again, it's always a pleasure to be here in front of all of you, updating you and answering all the questions that we can.
Thank you, Director. Just a reminder that one of us or some of us have asked you for a request for a data. Please submit those data to the individuals. Or
Absolutely, I'll remain consistent in that
thank,
way.
thank you, sir. And this conclude. You may now for you can be be excused and we'll have a 3 minutes, 5 minutes recess. Thank you.
Thank you.
session. Um, is there any announcement?
Yeah, 1:30. Ways and Means. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Manglonia. Can I get a motion to adjourn? So move.
Oh wait, I move to adjourn. Second.
The motion to adjourn has been seconded, and this conclude our.
All in favor?
All in favor say yay, nay.
Aye.
I mean aye, and all opposed nay. Well, I has it, and we are now adjourned. Thank you.